well look around the rest of the world and look at some of the worst human tragedies and do our bit to help. But no government in the world has got a moral right, still less a duty, to go helping other people while they've got grotesque poverty and wickedness such as the drugs trade and so on going on in their own country. But we're the only people who say that. That our job, if the British people elect us, when the British people elect us, is to look after the British people and not go around poking our nose into other people's business. So people should be voting for us. And when you've got that crash, which is coming, a lot more people are. Which is why there's no need to worry about the fact that, partly because a lot of our people have heard the message time and time again before, meetings like this, there's some people who are really regulars, you know they're still around, but they're not here, are they? They'll be back. The voters, the people who thought about voting for us, but backed off at the last minute, they'll be back. One more thing, because what I've talked about mainly is economics, but there's a direct connection between economics and race relations. One of the things that Enoch Powell and the National Front, when it was still a sensible, decent organisation in the 70s, when it was winning seats in Blackburn, and the British National Party, have always said, one of the things we said was most crazy about creating a multiracial society was that multiracial societies just about work if you've got lots of money to throw at them, most of the time. Unless you've got a particularly unpleasant and aggressive ethnic minority with an unpleasant ideology or religion which makes it a menace to its neighbours, unless you've got them in your area, then actually multiracial society is just about bearable if there's enough money from central and local government to throw at things so everyone's happy. But that any society which comes under strain, under stress, whether it's attack from foreign terrorists or problems with the economy, at that point, if everyone in an area is basically the same, if your grannies know each other and you went to the same schools and you share the same history and the same heritage and you've got the same interests, then a society like that can muddle along under a lot of pressure. It's something which actually, if I was speaking, say, in the remaining white pieces of London, people, older people there would understand it far more because they remember the Blitz, which didn't affect many places up here, in this neck of the woods. And they instantly understand, but again, especially older people who've been through the last war will know as well what I'm talking about, that a society which is homogeneous, where we're basically all the same, when it's put under pressure, it comes together, doesn't it? A society when everybody's different, you put it under pressure and they start blaming each other. And they turn on each other. And they turn on each other's societies and groups. And then you get things which start like Northern Ireland and end up like every other multicultural, multiracial society in the country, in the world, which has created things like Bosnia, former Yugoslavia, Rwanda. All these places where people hack up their neighbours with machetes, they're not hacking up neighbours like themselves, they're hacking up neighbours from a different ethnic or cultural or religious group, because that's what human beings tend to do. It's no unique wickedness of the British National Party, racism. There's no British National Party in Rwanda, but you've got two totally different tribes who can just look at each other and say he or she is from a different tribe. And if I don't get him or her, they're probably going to get me, so out come the machetes. That's just human nature. That's why it was so mad to create a multiracial society, especially in the third most overcrowded country in the world, which didn't have an economy which long term is going to last really well. And that's where we're at now. Now this isn't just the Labour Party, sorry, the British National Party. The Labour Party know this as well. There was an article in the Scotsman newspaper on the 2nd of January this year, when a senior left-wing journalist up there, he wrote this, that in the Labour Party there's a growing number of Labour MPs who admit privately that Britain is an unexploded race bomb. That's the Labour Party. Being written about by a left-wing journalist saying that Britain is an unexploded race bomb. And the only thing they say that's stopping it going off is the fact the economy is going along really well. But they're worried that come the economic downturn, there's going to be hell to pay. So, I've just shown you the points at which we've got an economic downturn, not around the corner, it's here, now, right now, starting. And it's going to get worse and worse and worse. And at that stage, then in areas like this, the racial problems are going to get worse and worse and worse very soon. Which means that the establishment, the main parties, the old parties, and the government, let's face it, who are they going to blame? They're going to blame us. Actually, specifically, they're going to blame me. But also the local candidates and so on. They're going to blame us. They're going to blame the British National Party. Stoning the messenger is a very ancient tradition, and they're going to do that. But I don't for one minute think ordinary British voters are going to buy into that. We're the ones who warned. We're the ones they thought, yeah, I think they're probably right, but I'm not doing too badly economically. I'll carry on voting Labour, or I won't bother to vote at all. Because I don't like them, but I don't hate them that much, because at least Gordon Brown's kept things going. And that's right where we are now. There's an unexploded race bomb, which the Labour Party say is going to be detonated when the economy goes down the tubes, and the economy is going down the tubes. This is why, just finally, there was an article in The Observer this weekend. It's the Sunday version of The Guardian, so it's massively heavy and massively boring. Very, very few people read it, but it is worthwhile. There was an article in there by Will Hutton, who's one of the intellectual big beasts of New Labour. He's not an MP, but he's one of their advisors. Will Hutton writes a new book, and Tony Blair and Jack Straw and all the others rush off to read it, because he's got a bigger brain than they have. Not particularly difficult in some cases, but Jack Straw in particular. There you are. Will Hutton is one of their people, and Hutton writing about the result of the European referenda last week, where first the French and then the Dutch said, no, we don't want your federal Europe at all. We want to preserve our own culture and our own identity, and in particular, we do not want to be part of a federal Europe, which is going to include Turkey, because that's another 75 million Muslims, which suddenly tips from Europe from being a Christian or secular democratic collection of nation states into being a federation where the largest ethno-religious bloc which has got any cohesion is Muslim. And we don't want to be part of that, because the French have already seen what that would mean in cities like Marseille and in cities in Paris, just as people in Lancashire have seen what it means in Cone and in Burnley and in Blackburn and in Preston and all the rest of it. People have seen it, they don't want it. So the French and then the Dutch said, no, we don't want a single part of this. Now, as a matter of fact, it doesn't matter what they say, because they're going to get it. Because the liberal elite is determined to force on every single nation of Europe, including ours, rules by the Brussels elite, and however much we vote against it, we're not even going to get a choice. They're not going to have a referendum now, because they know the British people would say no. Doesn't mean they're not going to impose their federal European superstate. They're just going to do it without asking us. But the good thing about what the French and the Dutch have done is that by saying no, it's clear there's no democratic mandate for it whatsoever, which one day will make it easier to overthrow. So the French and the Dutch have done a good thing. But of course, Will Hutton, writing in The Guardian, in the Observer, thinks they've done a terrible thing. You know, voting to preserve the freedom and independence that your forefathers fought for. Actually, in the case of the French, it's not quite right. Our forefathers fought for their freedom and independence, but that's a scenario or a worst-case scenario. And the optimistic scenario was that somehow the nations of Europe agree to being subsumed in an economic and political superstate, and it's all sorted out, and the economy picks up, and by 2010 everybody's happy. We're all really happy that we've all got the euro, and therefore we're motoring along, and that's it. That's what Will Hutton, this Labour Party big beast, says. That's the rosy side. The worst case scenario, he suggests, is that things aren't pulled together, that the French economy remains a mess, that the Italian economy remains a mess, that Britain's economy gets hit because America's economy is a mess, and at the end of this period, by 2010, he says his worst case scenario, a few points, one of which he's saying 2 million unemployed. Well, there was a time in the 1980s when you'd have thought 2 million unemployed, that sounds fantastic. That sounds like heaven. We're not going to get near that, are we? So he's not saying economic catastrophe, he's just saying 2 million unemployed, a minor recession. And the other thing he said was that just before the 2010 general election, it may be 2010, it may be before then, but that's the latest date, he said 2010 general election, British National Party is tipped to win 50 parliamentary seats. That's the big beast of the Labour Party's intellectuals